that the Senate agree to the House substitute to Senate Bill 202.
In March, the Republican-controlled legislature in Georgia passed a law reforming the state's voting and election system.
We quickly began working with the House and Senate on further reforms to make it easy to vote and hard to cheat. The bill I signed into law does just that.
The 98-page-long bill, SB 202, is the first major election-related bill signed into law in a swing state since the 2020 election. Voting rights advocates argue the changes unfairly restrict access for certain groups.
My first reaction, honestly, was, can we get a break?
And I don't think we as disabled people who also happen to be black and rural, at a whole lot of times, we are not really considered when decisions are being made.
There has been no clearly defined evidence of fraud in Georgia. There hasn't been any need for any of these restrictions, and none of them have been justified, in fact.
I'm a blind individual, and I've seen everything from separate waiting rooms to separate movie theater seating to a black president. And first thing that came to my mind is, wow, they want to take us back to Jim Crow.
Georgians will no doubt be soon overwhelmed with fancy TV ads, mailers, and radio spots attacking this common sense election reform measure. According to them, if you believe in protecting the security and sanctity of the ballot box, you are, quote, Jim Crow in a suit and tie, end quote.
When people think about voter suppression, I think they consider it as overt, as people being dragged out into the street, dogs being unleashed on people, bodies being dragged in the street. That is not all that voter suppression looks like. One of the modern ways that I can think of off the back is the Shelby v. Holder decision.
Largely southern states that had these special requirements that the federal government imposed in that 1965 Voting Rights Act, they are no longer going to have to deal with that, at least for the time being, unless Congress takes special action.
Once that decision had the full force of the law for all of our states, Georgia started closing down polling locations left and right. The majority of these closures were in Black and brown communities, which means for those voters, they have a much harder time to vote. That momentum has continued with this legislation that we just saw in SB 202. Once that passes, that means that it's going to be far more difficult for people of color to be able to do things that they're accustomed to doing.
I've never seen them do a signing ceremony behind closed doors. I've never seen them do it that quickly.
Are you serious?
No, you are not.
No. She's not under arrest.
Some of the most concerning provisions in the bill restrict access to voting. Ballot drop boxes are now permanent, but only available at certain locations and during limited times.
Now counties have to limit the drop boxes that they can even use. So now they have to figure out, well, what does that mean? Does that mean I have to rip them out of the ground because they're bolted to the ground? Now they have to be removed.
Also, the absentee voting period is shortened with new ID requirements.
I've always been registered to vote in Pennsylvania, despite all of the on-the-ground work that I do in Georgia. The first election that I would have had an opportunity to vote in Georgia would have been the gubernatorial election, but I was really confused by the laws and the restrictions and what would be the repercussions if I changed my address, and I didn't want to switch and then not be able to vote or, face some of the problems that my peers were facing.
The Secretary of State is demoted from chairing the state election board.
I think what's really stark there is that he's a duly elected representative of the people. So I am very afraid that sets a bad precedent for removal of officers, duly elected officers that the legislature just doesn't happen to agree with.
And the bill criminalizes delivering food, drinks, and chairs within a certain distance of a polling place or line.
If Barbara, my cousin, she's out there in a wheelchair trying to cast a vote, and she's out there for an hour and a half. I can't bring her any water or a snack. And who thinks like that? The disabled community is a part of that demographic is being hurt by this.
And the way that you vote independently, if you have low vision, is that you use technology.
The current machines that we have do not support them, so they've had to bring their phones in that have readers on them so that they could vote independently, secretly, like those of us who can see get to do. But this bill continues, despite their clear pleas about this, continues to criminalize the use of a phone inside of the voter ballot box.
I would like to see that it be mandatory in every Board of Elections training from this point on that there be at least one section solely geared towards accommodations.
I think that we should really look at the turnout and the outcome of the last election as a positive and as a reason to look at what did work and make that more prevalent and make it easier, as opposed to using that to make it harder.
There's going to be a lot of need to pay attention to every single meeting, every single discussion, every single time. And so we're going to get people equipped to do that.